What I am going to talk about today is collaboration and more particularly unlocking new operating models through collaboration. And this morning there were a number of speakers that resonated with me, and there was some material this morning that I'm going to reflect on because it's quite opposite to what I'm going to talk about today. And this morning Jackie Johnson spoke about strategic leadership. And that being adaptive and agile in order to create the platform for innovation in an organisation. How hierarchies and structures don't give you results. It's what people do and think and how they act, and that hierarchies can kill innovation. And she also talked about the more feminine styles. Also, we'll touch a wee bit on that. Tom talked about small things that become very powerful, tiny beginnings. The value proposition of a Raspberry Pi that can save you thousands or millions of dollars through very innovative deployment. Planned chaos, innovation and relentless prototyping. We also heard from Tim Ockleshaw, who talked about the need to think differently across the system and get rid of some of our old ways of thinking and our old ideas. So when I looked at this topic, I thought of many of those same things. Now, I work for the Ministry of Social Development, and our purpose is to help New Zealanders help themselves be safe, strong and independent. And I'll touch on a couple of those things in the course of my talk. But when we're talking about unlocking new operating models through collaboration, this is in the context of this rampant 21st century, the rampant digital age. Big data, the cloud, social media, mobile, in a very secure environment. These are the imperatives of the age in terms of what we've got to grapple with and how we get stuff done. So when I looked at unlocking new operating models, I thought that in this digital age there must be an app for that. So I looked on the Apple App Store, and there was a lot of apps. I didn't find anything about collaboration or new operating models. I looked on the Android side, very similar. So I looked on the Microsoft App Store, didn't find much at all. So the answer does not lie in technology. We know in this digital age we have to do things faster. But as with many things, it's the human factors that are the most important. And I will contend that the most important factors involved with unlocking new operating models are releasing capacity, building trust, and aligning for greater collective impact across your system. Now, when I talk about releasing capacity, I'm talking about making the space whereby you can actually do something new. If you're going to do something new, you've got to stop doing something that's got less value. If you don't do it, it's a fantasy. You simply cannot graft on top of what you're already doing a new innovation or a new way of doing things. You must consciously stop doing something else. Now that's really hard. It's very hard indeed. And if the people in this room, if you're like me, you've come to conferences like this and been fired up about the next big thing. And you're going to go back to your team, enthuse them, they're going to get fired up as well and say, yes, we're going to do this. And 2 months later, we compare notes. How have we gone with that? Oh, BAU got in the way. There was new legislation. This happened, that happened. We've made no progress. And then, a month later, you might as well not have been to the conference. The cadence of BAU in the organisation is grounded out. So, in the spirit of what Tom was talking about, of something very, very small, creating great value and doing something big, I'll contrast that with an exercise that I did with my senior team a couple of years ago, which was, we did an exercise called Habit 21. And we'd all read Stephen Covey's book about time management and the time management quadrants. And ideally, you spend your time in quadrant 2, which is where you are focusing on things which are not urgent but important, the strategic things, the things that will drive your organisation forward over time. Because if you're always in the urgent modes of time management, you don't get that time. You're always in reactive mode, you're firefighting, the organisation doesn't improve, it doesn't move forward. So every day for 21 days, we sat down for half an hour and talked about what we'd done the preceding day. Mapped our time to those quadrants. What we found at the start was that we weren't spending a lot of time in what was quadrant 2, that strategic arena. And the intent of the habit that we were going to develop in 21 days was a habit of mindfulness about where we spent our time. How could we release our own capacity so that we could lead new innovations across our organisation? And in the course of that, we did develop a far greater sense of mindfulness. We got our time in quadrant 2 up to over 50%. The thing that was quite shocking was the urgent things in Covey's quadrant 1, which is urgent and important. That was quite high at about 25%, but also just as high was, or even higher, was urgent and not important. So a senior management team that was spending a quarter of its time on things that seemed urgent and warranted immediate attention, but they weren't even important. In our case, you couldn't relate the topic to the business of helping New Zealanders help themselves be safe, strong and independent. So we've been boring down on that and making sure that absolute waste is reduced and encouraging our staff to do the same. Tom talked about his 400 emails this morning. Well, that's one thing you can give away straight away. People religiously tied to their machines, they go back to their desk and they get fastened into that email rhythm, destroying value as they go, because most of them are spam. Tom talked about 65% spam, I reckon it's closer to 90%. People wasting each other's time. So the first thing we did there was stop sending each other emails. It was utterly fruitless. So now sometime on, that's just an example, sometime on that grain of release has really mushroomed inside my organisation. And in a workforce that I could have told a couple of years ago, oh, we want you to innovate, we want your ideas, and I would have met with stony-faced silence, now believe it is possible. They now believe it is possible to create the space where you can do new things. If you want to do more of something, you've got to do less of something else. You must create the space for that new thing to happen. Now, I'm also working on a new operating model of my own. Well, me and my team, not just me obviously, but that is putting in place a bimodal approach or a two-speed approach to IT delivery. So we've heard from Jim just now about data centres and the custodianship of data and all those big systems of record that you need to protect and make sure the data is protected, those sorts of things. We know that they don't enable you to go at digital speed, those systems. So in the bimodal two-speed IT approach, we liberate the front end so that that can go at digital speed. And there's a team at MSD who just focused on that front end experience, customer co-design, multidisciplinary teams, 5 releases a day if need be, so that you can actually have the best of both worlds. So in terms of that release and capacity argument that I've been making, my work in terms of the establishment of the bimodal capability has been to encourage people to release their time from unproductive, low-value work to release their old ideas. There's an awful lot of religion in IT, unfortunately. And people are often defined by what they've been doing in their job for the last couple of decades. And it's not fit for purpose anymore. So encouraging people to release those ideas has been vitally important. And catching people do the right thing, catching people be innovative, catching people having release capacity of their own by stopping doing something that was within their remit to do or to change or to innovate around. And the snowballing effect, the viral effect of that right across the workforce intensifies every day. So the second of those dimensions I'll talk about is building trust. And without trust, there can be no collaboration. well, it's not going to be a very good collaboration. In fact, if you look at new business operating models, it's very hard to imagine an operating model of one person. So that might be cooking eggs or something like that. But beyond that, an operating model that is going to make a difference to the kind of mission that we've got as an organisation will require a lot more people, like the bimodal approach to IT we're doing. And I think there's a very common experience here. Well, a lot of people in this room would have perhaps experienced that death march to the bottom scenario where you're at war with a vendor or a customer. A philosophy and approach which is doomed to make both parties fail. And I used to do a bit of that. And back to Jackie's point on the feminine styles, in those situations it's usually men who are the protagonists, to be fair. So what other approaches are needed? I remember a mammoth project that was vitally important to our organisation a few years ago where we were trying to retire the Unisys mainframe. And that was a terribly, terribly complex, risky project. And it had massive reasons for getting off the mainframe. And as you'd expect, the type of project for which there's no blueprint, we were taking a Unisys Link application and turning it into a Java Oracle application with the same functionality. Early on, things got very tense, things started badly, got worse. Now, one thing happened. Me and my team prepared a bit of a dossier for what the vendor had done wrong. So we went into their boardroom. The second I walked in, I could smell the tension, and I realised they were equally well prepared. And this sense of impending utter doom came over me. And I said, before I even take my seat, we've got to stop this. We have got to find a different way. This will not work. We have to get a collective agreement on how we're going to do this. We have to move forward together. And in that moment, I think trust was built. And we started trusting each other that we would do our roles and we would work hard for each other. And getting off that mainframe has been spectacularly successful. That project went very well after that. Well, had problems along the way, but we had trust and faith in each other that we could navigate those issues. So that building trust in a supercharged digital age where you've got to do things fast, you can't wait for the other guy or the other girl to be trustworthy and they now meet your standard. You've got to start. You've got to start by making yourself vulnerable, I think. You've got to condense the time frame within which those trusted relationships can commence. So in terms of the bimodal operating model at MSD, my time is right across the IT team because there are clearly people who don't believe in it, but and would like to undermine it a bit. But I spend most of my time promoting trusted relationships. Most of my time scanning for conflict. Don't let the sun go down on unresolved conflict. Make sure people understand the difference between debate and conflict. Conflict will kill collaboration and you'll get nowhere. Which leads me on to my last point about aligning for greater collective impact. Another story, I worked for an IT services company where the chief executive decided to create a fire of innovation under some of the workforce. He called it Project Big. And it sounded grand, and it meant the section of the workforce imagining new things and how they were going to do things differently in the future. Unfortunately, the senior management team, including me, didn't know that, and all we saw was our staff going rogue, not billing their time, not bringing in the revenue. So it was going to be a catastrophic failure, and luckily that was averted. And I contrast that with a project that we've had just recently at MSD, which is the Welfare Reform Project. A gift from the government and a movable deadline, a seemingly impossible outcome. We talked a wee bit about the analytics and the evidence-driven work that we did out of that, but basically it was to change the setting of the welfare system. And it seemed such an impossible task. The whole organisation was galvanised. A common view, a common vision about how that was going to be done. So right across the policy team, IT, the service delivery teams, all aligned on that unity of purpose. And it went really well. So that's another huge learning for me on the bimodal project that I'm doing, is making sure that when people lose the context, what is the big picture? This goes back to New Zealanders helping themselves be safe, strong and independent. It goes back to our technology goals, it goes back to our business goals that we all agree on. So when you lose that context and you're thinking that your way of doing things is better than that way, actually let's get back onto that context and make sure that we're doing things the same way, the right way. And finally, I'll just talk about, I only had one slide, which is those things I've been banging on about. Releasing capacity, change, building trust across your system, agree and align in collective impact. And I just want to reflect on a sporting analogy, and then I'll be done, honest. I'm about to get kicked off, I think. And I think that's what the Black Caps have done, the New Zealand cricket team. I think they've released capacity to change, and partly that's their belief system. They started believing that, or stopping believing, their baggage was a draw was as good as a win. They stopped that. They gained trust in each other to be fit, to be well prepared, to bat and bowl with purpose, and to run down every ball to the boundary. If someone failed, someone else would step up. That trust built across the team. And they had alignment for a greater collective impact, and that was to be the best test playing nation in the world. They've transformed the way they've done stuff. Whether they achieve that goal or not, they've given themselves a chance. So, in the words of Brendan McCullum, dream big New Zealand.